Hi, everybody. It's me again. Thank you guys so much. Thank you to Andrea, Zare, and Imran for an enlightening discussion. We are going to switch over now to transition to a discussion on allyship, how we make sure it's real and not just a PR trick. We're going to start off with a short keynote with Theresa Alewine, the head of U.S. business management at RBC Global Asset Management, who's going to set the stage for the panel discussion to follow. Please welcome Theresa to the stage. You're on mute.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here. I'm so thankful to have this opportunity to speak to this topic. Here we are 2+ years into the pandemic and 2 years after the racial uprising that followed the murder of George Floyd in my hometown of Minneapolis, Minnesota. Where are we now compared to where we were 2 years ago? And have our communities of color and other marginalized groups experienced positive and meaningful change? Let's take a moment to reflect. Yes, right now. Please close your eyes and give yourself permission to think about everything that you've experienced since that horrific day and how the world changed for everyone. But more importantly, how that day brought to light the systemic racism that is embedded in our society and the impact it has had on our communities of color, from our neighborhoods, schools, to our places of employment, and those places we seek solace and guidance. Now take a full exhale and let that heaviness go. And take a moment to reflect on what have you learned about yourself. What observations have you made, and what difficult conversations have you had? What criticisms have you raised? What changes have you called out? And finally, what have you put into action to make sustainable change to address racism and promote equity and access? What is performative allyship? I'm here to talk to you about that today. And I akin it to like having that picture perfect home on the exterior that is admired by everyone who passes it. But then you open that front door and you walk inside and it is a full-on construction zone. You may have the blueprint, you may have hired the contractor, but the transformational work hasn't even begun. Simplistically, do you walk the talk or do you just talk? Much like putting together a racial equity agenda that on its surface looks and sounds effective, like effective steps to promote and curb racism and create equity. For instance, embedding a rainbow to your corporate logo to celebrate LGBTQ+ during Pride Month. But the organization doesn't use inclusive language or has a toxic work environment. Showcasing diversity, equity, and inclusion committee, that's a broad group of members, but it's not reflective of a diverse group. Promoting equity and inclusion that includes incorporating BIPOC images across marketing collateral, websites, social media posts, and making broad statements that embrace equity, diversity, and inclusion. But the organization's human capital does not mirror those images. Does this sound familiar? Is your racial equity agenda a checklist of things that are wrongs and calls out things that need to be fixed, alongside a bunch of nodding heads and a lot of discussion? Does that blueprint demonstrate change that is measurable and meaningful to marginalized populations? Much like that contractor, in order to have the house match that blueprint, a willing and dedicated team will need to come together with a shared goal to implement by putting into action visible results to finish that house. Here we are, 2 years later, after George Floyd's murder sparked a global movement for change. And we ask ourselves, have we made progress? As we walk into the house, has any measurable progress been made? For instance, is there electricity, running water? Can we live in it? And do we feel safe? Let's deconstruct the house, or think of it as non-performative allyship, and consider, what do we need to do to assemble a house that we can live in that is welcoming and accessible? I don't have all the answers, but in order to achieve a strong and sustainable foundation, I'll approach it from a less top-down view of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and share with you 3 approaches that has helped me deliver change. We each have a story about how we ended up where we are career-wise, and mine was honestly a fluke that was largely built on a desire to work in the city in a corporate setting during the summer between my sophomore and junior year in college. My educational background is not in finance, nor is it in business. I have an undergraduate degree in secondary education and an English and language arts degree. Yes, I wanted to be a high school English teacher. So how did I get here? What happened? The power of networking and maintaining relationships has helped me navigate my career in finance, along with some amazing mentors, sponsors, and advocates who were patient, provided meaningful guidance, and saw the potential I had. But most of all, putting myself in uncomfortable situations, an ongoing desire to learn, and of course, asking questions. Why am I sharing this backdrop with you? If we think about that house we are assembling, it takes people of many different talents to get the house operational. First, we need a contractor who is responsible for pulling the team together and identifying the team of diverse talents. The team of talents may include the electrician, the plumber, the drywall installers, painters, etc. But more importantly, more than just having a team pulled together, each and every one of them must show up and contribute in order to assemble a house. And sometimes the people who show up may not match every single skill set that we are looking for. One of those individuals who did show up but did not match every skill set was me, which is why, from my experience, I take the time to connect with people of many backgrounds, and using my own personal experiences helped me approach diversity, equity, and inclusion from a different lens that helps clear some of the barriers that many people face. Showing up has to be intentional and is one way to demonstrate non-performative allyship. What does that mean? For me, it means being an engaged ally and using as much institutional or social privilege to advocate for groups who may experience barriers by creating access through promotion and advocacy, such as recommending them for high-profile projects and creating network connections. It also begins with asking questions, being authentic, learning, seeking perspectives outside your typical sources, listening, networking, and mentoring at all stages across many generations, attending community events, and sometimes attending the events that are uncomfortable. As a person of color, it already can be intimidating to attend events where attendees don't look like you. It's even more so when you are a minority amongst another group of BIPOC individuals. Yes, that discomfort is part of showing up and being present. Experiencing discomfort is a part of learning and allows me to recognize the discomfort others face daily. But additionally, presence demonstrates commitment and willingness to learn about and listen to that community. Speak up. To influence and make sustainable change, you have to speak up. Take into consideration candidates for open roles. In our industry, we are struggling to find women who are interested in finance, let alone women of color. And the list narrows if you overlay the, quote, qualifications for certain positions. How do you screen candidates? Ask yourself, what are the basic requirements for the candidate to be successful? Does the candidate have a growth mindset? What experience does that person bring? And how can those complement the role that you are trying to fill? Consider your interview process. Is it complex? Does each candidate have the same experience? I recently challenged a hiring manager to rethink the interview process, including the number of interviews that the candidate would face in an entry role, by clearly stating, we are not hiring for the CEO here. We cannot be making the interview experience so robust and so rigorous that it's difficult and so difficult that it leaves the candidate with a bad experience or impression about our organization, especially when the candidate came in prepared, interviewed well, asked thoughtful and meaningful questions, and had a robust resume of accolades and achievements. And yes, in the end, we hired the qualified candidate without any further interviews. Be an advocate. Using my privilege and influence to advocate change, I often refer back to the definitions of diversity, equity, and inclusion. These three simple words carry a lot of impact. And when you dissect the words and apply it to our daily interactions, are we exercising with intention? Do we seek diverse candidates of diverse thought? Do we consider barriers? And what do we do to ensure that our underrepresented populations have access to opportunities that are available to the majority? And finally, how do we ensure a culture that nurtures and creates inclusion for teams to be their true, authentic selves? How do we deconstruct performative allyship? Put words into action. Be that contractor. Identify the collective group who can help assemble the house so that the outside and the inside reflect the blueprint. That exterior construction of the house is just as admirable as the inside of the house. Thank you.